Good evening. I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. A lot of politics. After the midterm election, this is lame duck session of Congress. However, because the Republicans will take over control of both houses of Congress come January, the positions here are not desperate. They're positioning. There are gestures towards large questions that will be revisited come the 114th Congress. My professionals join. First, my colleague and co-host, Thaddeus McCotter, WJR, the great voice of the Great Lakes. And we're joined by David Drucker of the Washington Examiner, who covers Capitol Hill very closely, and John Fund of the National Review Online, who covers the same very closely. Gentlemen, a very good evening to you. Mr. Drucker, I begin with you. Jonathan Gruber is everywhere but on television. I do not believe he made the appearance we were expecting over the weekend. After all, Mr. Gruber could have been misunderstood. He said last week he'd been speaking off the cup when he spoke against the American people and against what you'd have to say was transparency in the Affordable Care Act. He is off the screen. The president has not explained, nor has the president's office explained, the remarks that Mr. Gruber is making that point to the fact that he was in consultation with the president when the construction of the Affordable Care Act went forward, a construction that we're now given to believe was less than candid. This is damaging the White House. Today, a video appeared where the president, when senator in 2006, spoke well of Jonathan Gruber and his ideas before the Brookings Foundation institution. So, David, does the president need to turn this off? Good evening to you.
Good evening, John. And look, I think all that Mr. Gruber did was tell everybody what most of us knew when they were putting this law together and passing it. They believed so much in what it could do and would do for people that they did whatever was necessary to get it across the finish line, and they figured that once people got a taste of it, they were going to think it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And they have since shifted into, well, they'll get there eventually, and we believe in it. And, you know, they paid with a lot of House and Senate seats to get this thing done. And I think for the president at this point, the key is whether or not the law is going to stand and become ingrained as a part of the national fabric, let alone the healthcare system. And to the extent that Gruber's, the revelations of what Gruber thinks about what Gruber did causes them a problem, I think he would care about that. But otherwise, the way that this administration has acted when it came to its priorities was that it did not necessarily care about what it might consider short-term damage versus long-term policy priorities. And unless they see Gruber's videos as threatening the existence of the law, I don't think they're going to be that concerned ultimately, even if they should be.
Mr. Fund, does the video today of the president, when senator, speaking well of Mr. Gruber, require a response from the president personally? Because right now it's very difficult to trust what the president says about the Affordable Care Act or Mr. Gruber's remarks.
No, Gruber is so damaging, the president is best advised just to write it out for his purposes. I agree with David's analysis, but let me be very blunt. When the Supreme Court, and I'm very confident of this, rules the subsidies in the healthcare exchange is unconstitutional in June, the president will suffer not just short-term political damage, but long-term political damage. He will be forced to renegotiate Obamacare, not by executive order, but by actual sitting down with members of a hostile Senate and a hostile House. In addition, he will have to sit down with all of the 36 states that refuse to set up federal exchanges and have to negotiate with them about what the future is. And I think the states, I was just at a meeting of many states' attorneys general, they are going to demand as a price for putting in federal exchanges that Obama give them complete waiver authority and free them of all the federal restrictions on Medicare and health care spending. So the president is in a world of hurt because Gruber makes the Supreme Court's job of declaring the health care exchanges unconstitutional so much easier.
Thaddeus, does the Gruber episode, does that undermine the credibility of the President of the United States?
Yes. I mean, David said that it was what we all knew was happening at the time, but I don't remember the major networks or some other people saying that this administration and the Democratic Senate, the Democratic House are lying to you and think you're stupid and want to ram this down your throat, and hopefully you'll come to learn to like it. I don't remember that quite in that way as we were arguing this law. But the question that I would have for Mr. Gruber is, if he thinks the American electorate is so stupid, isn't this the same electorate that elected Obama twice?
Gentlemen, there's too many. There's too much. We're overwhelmed. Thaddeus voted to start with farce tonight. Now we have to move to the tragedy of immigration reform, because the president is threatening. Is that the word? Thaddeus, is that too strong a word? Is he threatening? Is he asserting? What is he doing with immigration?
He's rattling his letter opener.
Okay, he's rattling his letter opener about immigration. David, there are voices in the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. There are voices now, the president's own party, other professionals saying, Mr. Obama, don't do this. Is the president in a position to back off? Can he let this go another few weeks for the new Congress, David?
Well, I would be surprised if he backed off, because even post-election, he has not reversed course or backed away from the, promise that he made before the election to go ahead and do this. And the leaks that they've presumably allowed to come out of the White House is that they are going to go possibly as big as possible. One of the numbers that was reported was 6.5 million people would be protected, would be basically given legal status. And before the election, the best number I had heard was 5 million. And so I don't know at this point how the president backs away and doesn't completely look ineffectual and see the bottom drop out of any credibility he has. Of course, the problem here for the president is that he's the one that said this was illegal.
Right.
A lot of people said it would be illegal, but he joined them, and he said it repeatedly. And I think that by doing this, you're not going to see immigration reform done for the rest of his presidency through the Congress in any form, and it's going to make any other negotiation that much harder. But it won't be much different than the past 6 years.
John, Senator Lee from Utah was on the Face the Nation yesterday declaring that 74% of the people who voted at the midterm election do not want this to go forward. That's the voice of the American people. Does the president risk his credibility if he goes forward defying the people's decision?
Excuse me, John. The president's press conference said he was listening to the voices of the 2/3 of the American people who didn't vote.
Yes, he did say that.
So, who cares about who voted? Look, President Obama is doing a remarkable political science experiment. He is doing 180 degrees opposite of what Bill Clinton did after his second-term victory, which is, rather than accommodate himself to the temper of the times, he is going to march into the teeth of the bitter winter wind blowing at him. And look, Bill Clinton, despite the impeachment of Monica Lewinsky, ended his term popular and is more popular than ever. And his years are viewed as halcyon years. Barack Obama has decided, forget the rule of law, it's the rule of men, and I'm the top man. And I'm going to do whatever I want, and eventually people will appreciate it. Well, it's an interesting bet, and it's a completely opposite bet of what Bill Clinton made, and I'll wager that Bill Clinton won that bet, and Barack Obama will lose his.
Thaddeus, is there a way for the president to climb down from this? Because it really looks like he's taking a huge risk.
I can't stop laughing about that. I'm listening to the 2/3 of the people who didn't bother to speak in the last election.
Right.
But when you think about this, John, the president, again, if he was in a band, you'd have thrown him out a long time ago. He's tone deaf. As John Fund has laid out, the biggest dilemma for the Republican Party would be the president reaching out to them to actually engage in solving this issue the right way, because of the divisions within the Republican Party itself on it. Instead, he's galvanizing them by defying them and being petulant and letter opening rattling and all that. He's missing a golden opportunity to do exactly what John Fund laid out, which is divide your opponent. Do not galvanize them.
The president will not explain, Jonathan Gruber. The president will not listen to voices saying, do not agitate the American people after the midterm election. We're going to turn to the Republicans next. Are they listening? Do they have a plan, not for the lame duck session, but for the new Congress come January 3rd, 2015, John Fund of the National Review Online, David Drucker of the Washington Examiner, Thaddeus McCotter, WJR, the great voice of the Great Lakes. A vote no for the Affordable Care Act in March of 2010 is Mr. McCotter. I'm John Batchelor.